Everyone. It is 11:05. Indeed, it looks like I have lost a couple people, but I hope that we will all kind of trickle back from our break. Why don't we all just kind of stand up really quickly for a second? For those who are able, if you're not able to stand, you can just, shift a little bit in your seat. Go ahead and watch you just like, shift to the side a little bit, you know, you know what I mean? Maybe put your hands over your head a little bit, go stretch back and forth. If you're ambitious, you can touch your toes or at least kind of bend if you're ambitious. All right, and then just kind of shake it all the way off. Just shake it right on off. All right, you may be seated. Now, you can't say that I did not move you in any way, shape, or form today. My name is Reverend Amina McIntyre. They give me the doctor honorific because I'm really close, and so I'm grateful for the possibility for the future casting, as we like to say. But I am also just grateful to be here and grateful that I was invited by the Black Church Cornerstone Collaborative to have a conversation today. And I think it's kind of appropriate for us to be talking then about faithful presence, Black pastoral and spiritual care in church and community after the wonderful, lively panel that we just had. I just want to kind of open us up by starting with a quote from W.E.B. Du Bois. In his book, the quintessential book from 1903, on the souls of Black folks, in his chapter 10 of The Faith of Our Fathers, he writes, "The Negro church of today is the social center of Negro life in the United States and the most characteristic expression of African character." And why do I bring that up in a conversation around pastoral and Black spiritual care? That if the Black church is a place that is the social center, that means that it is also the care center of the community. It is also the care center of the community. And so today we're going to do, and I've given my notes out because I recognize that people are a variety of learners. I also recognize that when I get really excited, I talk very quickly. And I do not want you all to miss any of the things that I am saying, but I'm hoping that we will have, just for the next 45 minutes, a lively conversation and discussion around pastoral care, Black pastoral care, spiritual care, and kind of conversations around how it looks in our communities. So the first thing that, before we even get started, I always ask, what is Black pastoral and spiritual care? Now, don't cheat. For you, what is Black pastoral care and spiritual care? If you think of the word pastoral care and spiritual care, what do you think about? Think about self-care. Okay, tell me a little bit more about what self-care is for you. How do you define self-care? Mm-hmm. Okay. Pouring into yourself. All right, good. That is definitely a way of spiritual care. Absolutely. So you said self-care, pouring into yourself. Go ahead. What do you say in the back? Congregational care. Taking care of the members in the church. What else? When we think, I'm sorry, go ahead. I love that. See, she said spiritually, physically, and providing resources where needed. Amen. What else is considered to be spiritual and pastoral care? When you think about spiritual and pastoral care, we heard self, we heard congregational care. What else are we thinking about? All righty. Well, since we are a little quiet on this morning, we're going to keep on going. Now, I am an interactive person, so you're going to talk today. I just want you to know that we're going to get nice and warm and lively in here in just a few minutes. But one of the things that I like to mention is for pastoral care as defined by Edward Wimberly in his book, Pastoral Care in the Black Church, is the bringing to bear upon persons and families in crisis the total caring resources of the church. Now, he was writing in 1979, this particular text, and so he was really thinking about pastoral care at that time in the way of the foundations of like clinical pastoral education and what we call pastoral theology, which were doing these kind of theories of care and thinking about how to meet people at their particular acute needs. He does offer, though, that the church, that there are 4 elements, so worship, care, nurture, and witness as a part of these pastoral care elements. And one of the things that I do want to note, because we have pastoral and spiritual care, that one of the reasons that it is typically called pastoral care is because it really has kind of typically revolved around the pastor or this Christological idea of the pastor as a shepherd. Right? And so now, so a lot of us have actually participated or have seen this kind of care or probably have, if probably have received this kind of care in our lives, and if you haven't yet, keep on living because, it'll probably be coming along. And so the other term, though, that we're using here is called spiritual care. And spiritual care, according to Amber Coates, I do want to point out, for example, when we talked about congregational care, that falls under pastoral care specifically. But spiritual care, according to Amber Coates et al., is that in in chapter that they wrote called "And the Truth Shall Set You Free from the Critical Need for CPE Among African American Clergy in the Age of Black Lives Matter," they define it as meeting the deepest needs of the people in our community. Meeting the deepest needs of the people in our community, right? And so I feel like this definition, and so spiritual care typically expands the definition beyond just the pastor, beyond just the church, beyond just Christianity, into saying anybody who needs care can get care. And so now all pastoral care is spiritual care. All spiritual care is not pastoral care. That's typically how we kind of explain the difference between the two. And so we use both terms because very typically when we are in the Black church, very often our focus tends to be on the church and the congregation and the people within the congregation and maybe the persons in the community who are right beside us, right? Now, I will say that congregational care also fits in spiritual care because we just said how that works, but also self-care and other kinds of communal cares and stuff also fit into that space too. But I do want to kind of talk about a little bit that one of the ways that care kind of comes up for us is this idea of thinking about how we can help people keep their basic needs, get them met, and make sure that their basic needs are met, but also make sure that they're as whole as possible in the process of getting their needs met. What does that mean, right? And this is not a trick question, I promise. But typically, when we're thinking about getting people the care that they need at the time that they need it, it means finding out the care that people need and providing the things that they need, right? So very often we like to feed the homeless, and I think it's great that we feed people who are hungry, but what is the dominant need? Someone who is homeless, or someone who is unhoused. Their dominant need is getting housing and getting fed and getting clothes and other things. But if you give clothing to persons who don't have a place to put them, are we actually fulfilling all the needs that they need at that time? And so how can we be thinking differently about those care things? So basically, pastoral and spiritual care kind of helps us to think through what all the care needs are in that space. So I want to also mention, too, that as we're thinking about kind of the definitions of pastoral and spiritual care, we're also kind of thinking about this in both as an individual space and a communal space. So we mentioned self-care, again, earlier. So individual care typically is kind of the one-on-one. So if you all paired up right now and you all started doing intercessory prayer for one another, you all are doing kind of individual kind of prayer, right? You're doing individual care here. But it can also be small group focused. So if it's just a group of people and you all know each other and it might be just maybe two, where 2 or 3 are gathered, there we are in the midst, right? So there's care that happens maybe in a smaller group. When we're thinking about communal care, it goes back to the congregational care, right? So we're talking about the public, the niche private. So I say niche private because when we all get together in our denominations and we have our ways of doing things and the way that we support one another, that's kind of a niche private because if you're not from that community, you might be like, well, what is this? But everybody in the congregation is like, oh, no, this is how we get our care going. This is a good thing. And so we kind of talk about niche private in that way, but also congregations and also larger spaces. And so before we kind of continue to move forward and talk through care, I actually have a small activity for us. If I get a little bit of help, I got some pictures. Just pass some pictures out here. And you all will have to kind of group up. So you can pass them on that side, you can pass them on this side. You're going to have to group up, and so I do want you all to kind of connect with one another. So, no, just pass them out. So maybe like one per group. You can group people up. I'll give you permission to group the folks up. Group the folks up. Awesome. And I want you to kind of connect with the people who were around you, right by you. And I've given you all pictures of ways that care looks for folks, giving you all potential pictures of what care looks like for people. And I want you all to just talk very briefly amongst one another. I want you to ask yourself, what is happening in the picture, and how might this be a way of caring? What is happening in the picture, and how might this be a way of caring? What is happening in the picture, and how might this be a way of care? And I have some repeat pictures in case people still need some, but what is happening in this picture, and how is it a way of care? Yeah, one picture I mean, but they're together. They can talk to, if, if that's fine. They can talk together so long as they commune with one another and work it out. And for those online, there is a link that you all can see, and we'll make sure that you have that link as you are looking back. Just take one more minute. What kind of care are you seeing in this picture? What is it, and what kind of care are you seeing in the picture? What is happening in the picture, and what kind of care do you see is happening in the picture? Alrighty, take just a few more seconds to finish up. Alrighty, let's come on back to center. So we have the two questions were based on the picture, what is happening in the picture, and what kind of care do you see happening in the picture? Who would like to go first? Tell us what you were thinking about in your group. All right. Oh, and you just need to let us know what the picture is, because everybody hasn't seen the picture. Yeah.
Good morning. In our family picture around the kitchen table, we see a need of fellowship, a need of food, a need of family get-together, a need of maybe somebody had a bad week, and they're getting together, they're talking, just that fellowship. We thought it looked like a Thanksgiving dinner, but then some of us thought that it looked like just old-time Sunday dinner, and just the need to be together. Then in the black and white picture of the ladies on the bus, we think they're all ladies on the bus, we see a need of rest. Okay. They're tired, but then we see them literally leaning on one another and getting that time for some type of fellowship, even though it's like a quiet time, but just that need of I got you, you got me. That's what we see.
Awesome, thank you. Who would like to go? So we have some self-care, some communal care going on there, some individual and communal care. Who's next? And thank you, Dr. McIntosh, for.
In our picture here, it's a group of individuals around. As we looked at it, we saw that there was a closeness. There was the touching. People respond to a touch. And there, you look at the eyes of those who are here, their eyes are closed. They're not scared of anything. They're not concerned about anything else but the touch. There's an intimacy there. As you look over here on this side, at the top, there's a picture of an individual who's, and I can't hold it. Thank you. Thank you. Whose eyes are open. That suggests to me, as they look at what's going around here, I'm outside of that. That's a concern for me.
Okay.
The touching here, that the eyes are closed, the fact that there's a touch with this group, it signifies that they're connected and they're responding to the touch, nurturing. Here there's again the touching, eyes are closed, I'm at peace, I'm comforted.
Man, thank you. And thank you for all the nonverbal kind of cues that you picked up on, because very often when we are thinking about how we are administering care, we're not just thinking about verbal cues, we're also looking at nonverbals. All right, who's next? What other group has a picture? Let's share.
Raise your hand so I can bring you the mic.
Come on.
All these clergy.
I know, the quiet clergy, the quiet clergy corner.
And they threw the picture over to me. You may not be able to see this, but it looks like two adults preparing for Vacation Bible School.
Okay.
So they're creating a friendly environment when those children come in, so they'll be warm and welcoming to these blocks. They are red blocks and blue blocks that they are stacking. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
What kind of care are they providing by stacking the blocks?
Oh, friendly care.
Okay.
Spiritual care.
Spiritual care. Safe. All right. We got some playfulness going on. All right. What else we got? You all in the back over here? Oh, over to your left.
Excuse me, my voice has been strange.
It's all right.
This is the Lord's Supper, our communion, some people call it. And we look at it as an opportunity for us to come to the table and to remember what Christ has done for us. And also that it is a believer's table that is open to all, because it's not our table.
That's right.
And so all believers can come and take part.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of different kinds of extra care that go into it. There's the self-care of how do I come and be ready for what God is saying to me and what Christ is saying to me at the table, but also recognizing that the whole community is welcome. And there's hospitality then as a form of care. All right, who else? We got two more groups, it looks like.
Our photo of two young people that are swinging, we see joy. We see them being at peace, carefree. There's freedom in their sharing, and they're outside enjoying nature, God's nature, sunshine, and just being together.
I will tell you, my biggest form of care is listening to children laugh. Oh my gosh, children laugh like warm my spirit in a way that I can never, it's like almost a way that we can never replace. And the last group here, and then we will keep on moving.
Everybody turned around, looked at me. It's all right.
Everybody trying to dodge it, all these preachers in the room, dodging it.
Okay. What we have here are, we're assuming, a family that are sitting around the table. It's a more vintage photo. And when I really looked at that, it looked to be that this gentleman here is possibly a clergy type person. And everyone is looking toward him. So it's like they're looking to him for wisdom, for that spiritual guidance. And they're also with I'm assuming his mother. Here she's serving them. So it's a care of service as well. And even there, they look to be the unity there, and they're fellowshipping there. So there's quite a bit going on. But
absolutely,
yeah.
Thank you so much. And the reason why I gave you all these kind of visuals is because very often we talk about care, but sometimes we're like, well, what does care look like? But very clearly, you all were able to identify in these pictures different kinds of ways that you have seen care already taking place in your experiences. And so when we're thinking about ways of care, we think about ways, for example, worship is a way of care. Because, of course, we talk about, you come into the church one Sunday, and that song that someone sang can be the thing that gets you through the rest of the week. Something, what is it that we always say? It's like, something that I hope that something was said or heard that you can take out into the ministry and take out into the world, maybe be able to take your light out to see Jesus Christ and tell somebody else what it is that you have seen and heard in today. You know what I mean? All of those kinds of things are kind of looking at the way worship is a way of care. I also talk about the arts. Now, you all got the actual art piece. The group back in the back, you all actually got the actual art. An actual artistic painting of a pastor going to the church. So art itself in a variety of different genres is also a way of caring. And for me, I'm a preacher and I teach. I'm also a playwright. And so for me, the act of making is very much a form of care for me when I engage in the writing process or the making process. Also, and I'm not sure if I don't think anyone got the pictures, protest is a way of care. Protest is a way of communal care. And the Black church, as we mentioned on the previous panel, has absolutely been very involved in protesting and moving forward and making sure to provide the needs of persons within the system when they feel as if they're not getting their needs met. Right? Also play. So a lot of times when we think about offering care to people, very typically we're thinking about meeting them at places of trauma, and we're thinking about meeting them only at places of crisis. But how many of you all know that leisure and celebration is also a form of care? So if you're just like, oh, I need to go see a play, or I need to go to this basketball game, and we need to root for like our youth, because now have you ever, maybe y'all not like this, I'm definitely like the good auntie. I will be out there yelling for my kids. I'm not playing them games, and you can get these hands over my nieces and nephews. You sure can, every single day, because but the idea is that especially if they win, then there's this celebration that goes along with it, and that is also a form of spiritual care. And we can talk about the joys of care another time, because very typically, though, I want to just bring that up, because very typically when we're talking about care, we typically only talk about it from a place of crisis and a place of acute work. But also joy and celebration are forms of care. But also, too, fellowships and meals, which we showed in one of the pictures, mentorship, grief care. So no one got the picture also of the funeral. The form of care that a lot of us have participated in the most, typically in our churches, has been either mentorship or grief care. So supporting someone when families have had have lost a loved one. My mom is when we were younger, she would make sure that we would make a meal and take it to our neighbors next door if someone passed away, so that that person didn't have to think about food. And it was a form of thinking through grief care. So even if you weren't the pastor actually eulogizing, there were touch points and things that you did to support someone. And then there's visitations and so many other places that we can think about as our ways of care. And I invite you all, as we are continuing to think about ways that the church can care, to expand our ideas of what care looks like and how we can move forward in that work. I like to always bring up, and she's actually not a pastoral theologian, but Cheryl Townsend Gilkes, who famously wrote the book, If It Wasn't for the Women, actually wrote an article about the Black church as a therapeutic community. And one of the things that she mentions is that there are four specific practices that the Black church has always done that shows that we have been a therapeutic and a care space. One is it's been a place for people to articulate their suffering. It is a place to locate the persecutors and have a conversation about who persons are and what that looks like. This is a place for asylum, meaning space of refuge and safety. There's a couple people in the conversations that we brought up today. People said that their picture looked like they were, you mentioned that for the most part people were connected. There was one person who had their eyes open, but everybody else was connected and they felt safe enough to have their eyes closed. That idea that the church is a place where you can come in and rest and feel safe in church. And also, too, it's a space for the validation of experiences. Because when you're saying, I think I'm experiencing something, but other people are like, yeah, I experienced that too, then all of a sudden it becomes a community that can fully support. And the Black church has operated in that way in so many directions. And so I feel like, and she wrote that article in the early 90s, I argue that the Black church has also provided pastoral and spiritual care by steeping us in enriching who we are in our identity, by allowing us to do justice and advocacy work. So whether you are, and I tell people all the time, whether you were on the front lines actually marching, or whether or not you were somebody who was like, I'm gonna make the meals for the people who are gonna be hungry, when they finish marching, all of that is a part of justice and advocacy. Or even saying, hey, let me get your medicines for you, or hey, let me do this kind of work, let me help you fulfill a need. All of that is kind of justice and advocacy work. Also, healing is a part of it, this idea of how do we help people heal, and how do we help people make sure that they feel free enough to be who they are in this space and in this environment, and to also live as their best whole selves in an environment. And so now that we've talked about kind of what Black pastoral care and spiritual care is, and what individual and communal care is, and what ways of care are, who then are the caregivers? We're talking about this, who are the caregivers, right? Who are the caregivers? And I, of course, argue that, of course, we have trained clergy, and I will argue, you know, at the risk of putting myself back where we were on the panel in the previous, that not every clergy person is a good caregiver. It is the truth. But the idea is that persons who are clergy, who are trained in caregiving models and are also holding up their responsibilities, and they're making sure that they are being respectful of folks, can be very good caregivers when time is happening. And also, too, you don't have to be clergy or ordained to be able to provide care. There are plenty of lay folks that we can activate to say, hey, how can we care? I've actually talked to several congregations that actually have started doing like grief care ministries in their churches, or people who are just doing care ministries in their churches where they're working with people. Persons who, and I mean, I know I talked about feeding the homeless earlier, but like persons who have active food pantries, persons who have these things, these kinds of ministries. And also, if you are, I'm not going to say, now if you are someone who has to work with the children, baby, you are given all the care on a regular basis, and I think we got to celebrate the folks who do that work. But if we're thinking about the fact that, just as we talk about Christians all look like us, that there is a God that shines in each and every one of us, that we ourselves, if we look in the mirror, can also be caregivers. That means no matter your age, no matter your agenda, no matter what you have, you can be a caregiver. And if we are the ones who can be caregivers, then how can we make sure that we are activating ourselves and training ourselves and making ourselves available for when we are called to provide care? I do want to mention, because I do think that this is important, that very often we don't know who we are called to care for, and that ministry is messy, and that caregiving is equally as messy, and you are sometimes called to care for people that you probably would be like, that's not really my preferred person who I would like to care for. But at the same time, you're probably not somebody's cup of tea either, and they had to prepare care for you. So if you are, so at some point you're going to be a care seeker, and you would want somebody who's a caregiver to be somebody who is open enough to work with you and walk with you and to be a part of the conversation with you, and thinking about how you might provide care to whosoever might walk in the door, if we're really thinking about John 3:16, right? Whosoever walks in the door. And that is something for us, especially as we're thinking about the rural churches, and I even give that challenge to churches in general, that we are starting to expand, like if we are going to be the best caregivers, who are we as caregivers, and how can we make sure that we are open enough to serve the present age? And when I say the present age, I want to make sure, because very often when we talk about providing for someone, we're only talking about youth and young adults, and sometimes children. But how many of us are also providing elder care in our churches? Like, when is the last time you had a will workshop? Matter of fact, when is the last time you had a workshop? People always, I'm going to say this real quick and I'm going to keep it moving. When's the last time you had a conversation with elders about dating? Because the majority of the people who are actually getting married are elders, not younger folks. So, and you have to have some new conversations about what dating looks like, elders, and how to be safe in your dating practices and what that does. I mean, but if we're thinking about care and whosoever, we want to be thinking about, like I said, it's always, but we want to be thinking about what are the needs of providing full care for everybody. I'm going to tell you, like I said, the majority of the weddings that I've gone to in the past couple of years are people who are not under the age of 40, is all I'm saying. That's all I'm saying. But I do want to posit for us as we kind of go toward the end of this workshop, and I do want to open it up for questions if there are any, that there are a couple intentional practices that I suggest if you're thinking about being a caregiver and working through caregiving kind of work, and being able to be willing to provide care in any situation. The first is thinking about establishing rapport. What is the relationship that you might have? Can you build a relationship with somebody in the room? What does that relationship kind of look like? And also saying, hey, how are we, thinking very honestly about who we are in a situation and how someone also you might be the one that is getting care provided to you. You never know. But establishing rapport and thinking about how we connect and relate to persons. The other thing is, and I would say, is how do you assess the environment, right? And so very often we might go in saying, okay, so I'm going to go provide care, but you might have assumed that a certain level of care is needed, but you might get in that room and be like, that actually isn't the care that's needed. And so how do you allow the environment to talk to you also? How do you allow the group to talk to you? Like if I go out to pastor church, and I do sometimes get called out to supply, when I go out, I can't just be like, oh, I'm going to just come and just do whatever sermon I feel like doing. Wait. What does the church need right now? Who are the people here? And when I come to preach, I need to make sure that when I leave that environment, that I'm not breaking it down or I'm leaving it in a space or in a place that they themselves can't recover because I just went and did more harm than good. And so you have to think about what does the environment require and need. So after you establish rapport, after you assess the environment, and also assessing the environment is not just the physical environment. Sometimes it's, how we go into a place, be like, oh, we got to take the temperature of a place that we're in. You got to take a temperature of a place that we're in. Like, is the crowd warm today? Are we laughing? Are we a little serious? You got to assess the environment. Third thing I say that our intentional practices are thinking about the outcomes. What are the intentional outcomes that you are hoping for with that care? If the care is celebration, then what is the celebration going to look like? If the care is grief care, then what kind of grief care? Are you allowing persons to feel comfort once you're done? Are you making sure that you have a posture of comfort when you're leaving? And also, what kind of interventions and activities can be implemented? So this is where I think it gets a little fun. And I have a reflection for you, but I think we might be out of time. But I would love for you all to think about what activities and such. But activities, very often we're thinking, oh, let's just have a conversation. And that can happen, sure. But sometimes, like I said, I'm a maker. Sometimes I bring coloring books into the room. And I'm like, you want to color? Sometimes people be like, no. Be like, great. You want to write a poem? Sure, let's write a poem. So we might sit down and have a conversation where we are co-creating a poem. And in that conversation, someone might be like, wow, so this is really the issue that's happening. So it's not actually about the poem. The poem could be trash. It doesn't matter. But the point is that we're having the conversation in the room about what's needed, and that particular activity got us to the conversation around care that we were needing. And so what I would like for us to reflect on as you're thinking through the day, as we're thinking through how we go back into rural church spaces is, what is one practice of care your church could potentially implement or further? Who would it serve? And what do you hope could possibly come from that kind of care, right? So what kind of practice do you think you could possibly implement? Or are you also, and I said or further because you could already have something that is implemented that you feel is a good, solid care, something for you. Then who would it serve? And what do you hope would come from it in order to make sure that it's the best care experience? So thank you all so much. I think I got about 10 minutes for questions, 5 minutes for questions, if there are any questions. Or any comments or just feedback. You just like to attracting the lights.
I appreciate you mentioning play, because that's something that we don't really think about, recreation. We don't it's causing me to kind of go back and think about what could be possible at the places that I serve as it relates to pastoral care. Is creating space for recreation, having fun.
Yes.
So I appreciate that. I really appreciate you lifting that up. The whole presentation was just wonderful. But I really, really thank you for reminding me that you're right. We tend to think about congregational care specifically with a crisis context and not just in the thriving context. And so the pictures even signal to the various different broadened ways that we can think about that. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely, and thank you for, I tell people often about the care that play can do, and really part of it is that in the Black church, because, and of course, we tell ourselves very often, and we're reminding people that, you know, we had customs and things that existed pre-enslavement, but the reality is post-enslavement, we only ever have trained ourselves to look at ourselves through the lens of traumatic experiences. And so we're really having to retool our brains and retool our environments and retool the way we approach things. There's a guy, his name is Romano Guardini, who has a book, it's called The Spirit of Liturgy. And there's one chapter, he's a white Catholic priest, but he writes in there, there's a chapter called The Playfulness of the Liturgy. And he says in there that we take worship so seriously sometimes that there's no joy in it. And even in the thing, he's just like, do you think God wants to like always go to a church that's so serious all the time? And there's never any playfulness in the liturgy. And the idea of what play looks like in ministry, there's a lot of great people who are actually writing about that, like Lakeisha Lockhart, and there's a lot of other folks who are really just kind of talking about play in the arts and how the arts and play can be a part of this experience. So, yes, and then over there.
Hi there. Quick question, but a big concept. Being an educator in the school system, suicide, suicide prevention, how do you see the role of the Black church, you know, in dealing with that? It's such a big concept, and it's real, and mental health is real. It's important. What do we do? How can I help? You know, I don't even know the first step to take the initiative. I'm not a medical doctor, but would certainly like to help in, you know, that role.
Sure. So I have two things that I'll say. And I'll first say that I'm somebody who, if it was not for a church mother, I would not be standing here today. Literally, someone came over and was just like, let me come bring you a salad. And so if it wasn't for that person just coming over and being like, let me bring you a salad, let's have a conversation, they kind of knew that something was wrong. And so this person was, and she was just a church mother, she's like, yeah, something don't sound right. Let me come hang out with you. But two of the things that I will say would be very helpful, especially if you're just trying to think about just trying to get like formal training, mental health first aid is it's a license that people can get. It doesn't cost, you can get your church group you can say, hey, can we have someone come to the church? Just kind of like how you have CPR training. Mental health first aid kind of helps you get an idea of where people's mental state is a little sooner. And so you can kind of start seeing the signs. Very often, we don't know some of the signs that could happen with some folks because we're not seeing the signs, or we don't know how to identify them. Or we might be like, oh, but they were just smiling the other day. Or they're having a moment and we're not sure what that moment is. And so I highly recommend mental health first aid as one thing. But the other thing about right now, especially, bullying is a very large thing, especially around youth in particular, and social media. There are things that people can get on their phones, and things that even, and I'm just over 40, that even like when I was in high school, I did not have to deal with. You know, I mean, I had to go to school and get to the bullies, but I didn't have to deal with now people are coming home. And so the other kind of conversation is really really making an opportunity and a space to say, how can we make sure that we are, if we are noticing on some people who are seeing that they seem to be a little bit more isolated, that they seem to be having some sorts of conversations, and you're just like, I'm not really sure what's going on, but the conversations seem to be a little bit less around future work, but it's just kind of like maybe day to day or maybe not being here that day. Some of those things are kind of important as well, but also too, when thinking about being able to kind of recognize some of the signs ahead of time is just really kind of saying who are people in relationship with. Now, on the other side, and making sure that those relationships are solid or support. And if you're noticing people may not have those kinds of really supportive systems, or things might be breaking down in their systems, try to help on that front side of it, or to be able to refer out. So I am somebody who is trained in chaplaincy. I am not a therapist. And so that means that I help people on the front side for about the first 3 sessions, and then I refer you out to somebody who can help you. And I'm very, very clear about the fact that I can help you in this space, but I have a long roster of folks who I can refer you out to. So knowing those resources. On the other side of that, because this is the thing, we talk about prevention, but we don't talk about support on the backside. And I'll be honest and transparent. When we had somebody in my youth group who committed suicide, one of the first things that happened was we all had to sit down and come together, because we had a lot of questions about why. You always have questions about why, and you're gonna wanna make sure that you are providing a space for people to ask the honest questions about why they think something happened. We don't have the answers, and it is okay to not have the answers in a case like this. But it is also okay to remind folks, hey, folks love them. If anything has occurred, that it doesn't mean that God loves them anymore. It doesn't mean they're automatically going someplace simply because we feel like that's what the Bible has said, or that is what we've been taught what the Bible has said. Another thing is thinking about the long-term care of families after that, and friends groups after the situation has occurred. Very often persons, if parents have lost their child, very typically, especially to suicide, they rarely stay together. Divorce very typically happens in that. And or also, like, for example, if they were a sibling, you can almost 9 times out of 10 bet in about 2 weeks, some fight gonna break out. You have to be like, wait, what happened? And so thinking about behavioral differences and being aware of behavioral differences. But the biggest thing that you can do, even in addition to those things that I listed, is making sure that you're open and available, so that if the situation comes up and you have elected that you will be the one to walk through that situation with them, because you have a heart for that, to one, make sure that people know that you are willing and available, that you're willing to provide space. That doesn't mean that you provide answers all the time. It just means that you are able to provide space for the care to occur. And then also, too, that you yourself are making sure that you are doing your own proper self-care, because what you will be receiving in is fairly heavy. And so I hope some of these things are helpful. I know they're not the perfect answers, but I do hope that some of those things are helpful in terms of thinking about prevention as well as post-care, if in fact this does occur. So, and I know we had a question over here. Do you still? We have time for one more question. Reverend Rob came in, but I feel like we still got the one more.
One of my, I guess it's a statement and then just something we're doing here at Clay Street. But oftentimes we think our pastoral care is reactive rather than proactive. We see somebody in a situation, we might get a phone call or a text from someone, and then we want to step in and try to cover the gap or strengthen the gap. But here at Clay Street, what we have started to do is that we know often in the black church, I don't know anything about white church, I'm talking about black church, is we fetch people, but we don't fence them. And so we lose them. So what we have started to do here is our new members we have partnered them with a person who has been here for a while. And that person, if that new person has missed a Sunday or 2 Sundays is the max, then we have to call them and say, is everything okay? We've missed you. And it has been so eye-opening for us because we had missed one of our members, and one of the members had called Alvin, who is over our evangelism ministry, and told him that she had to start working on Sunday because of some financial hardship. But we would not have known that if we had not had that strategy in place. So I think oftentimes we wait for the crisis. When we know as a people it's about relationships, as you said. So as we continue to keep that door open of conversation and building that relationship, those families will feel more comfortable calling me or one of the other members, and then we can do what we need to do to help them with that resource.
Absolutely. Preventive care is extremely important because the idea is that once you have systems, or you really have systems, but also if you've established those kinds of relationships, then if a crisis occurs, you already have that trust built, so that that when something occurs, then you're just like, okay, well, I already know who to go to and where to go. So, all right. Thank you. I'm going to finish up. If you're welcome to contact me. If you have any other questions, you're welcome to just have conversations with me. But otherwise, thank you so much for listening and participating in our experience today around faithful presence and care in the rural situations.
Wonderful. Well, let's hear for her presentation today. We're so grateful. Thank you so much, sis. And so for those of you who are watching online, we're so grateful for all of you. We have been having a transformative time of equipping and leadership. Our next online session will start at 1:15 p.m. here in the sanctuary. And we'll be having a presentation by Sister Tanika Presenti. And she will be presenting on co-workers in God's service, bridging generations, and cultivating youth engagement in the Black rural church. Again, thank you all so very much, and we'll see our online participants back here at 1:15 p.m. Have a great afternoon, everyone. And for those of you who are here in person, we are now going to make our way to the Family Life Center so that we can participate for our next session, which is a luncheon with some inspiring gospel music and then an address from Reverend Larry Sykes. Thank you all so much for your participation. And as you all are making your way into the Family Life Center, we have t-shirts for everyone. So please make sure you stop by and get a t-shirt. And if you're someone that already has one, you can take another one and give it to somebody else.